Ladies, gentlemen, our next piece is from Cuba with love. Please welcome one of the real life Peter Pan kids, Dr. Manuel Prestamo.
Buenas noches. Bienvenidos. Oh, I forgot. I'm not in Miami tonight, huh? Well, in Miami, if you come to Miami, you don't speak Spanish, you will. One of the nicest things about Miami, we say, is that it's so close to the United States. Well, I was born in Cuba, and I got to tell you, there's about 2 million Cubans running around loose all over the U.S., but about 1 million of them still in Miami. They say Miami is the place where old Jews come to die. I say it's the place where old Cubans come to die. Friends asked me to write my story and share it with others so perhaps they might know what some of us went through. So I wrote a few things down, and I'll share them with you tonight. You know, back in the 60s, it was the place for Cubans to come to escape a tyrannical despot, a dictator, one who so abused his power, he had hundreds, if not thousands of people actually shot by firing squads and televised the events. He had people dragged out of their houses and shot in their front lawns, in front of their relatives, in front of their neighbors. I know. I saw it. So began years of horrendous migration. Perhaps the saddest of all, Operation Peter Pan, a secret operation to get kids out of Cuba, to allow their parents to try and stay and hang on to whatever they had, but get the kids out of the danger of being sent to Russia to be indoctrinated, to be returned to Latin American countries as spies. A total of 14,048 young kids between the ages of 16 and 17 were sent to the U.S. between December of 1960 and October of 1962. Those are the ones that were recorded. The truth is there were hundreds, if not thousands more. As myself, I am a Peter Pan kid. Getting the kids out of Cuba is a story unto itself. However, many of us shared such similar experiences. My friend Eloisa, when she was coming, her parents told her and her 8-year-old sister, "Dear, it's going to be okay. It's a temporary thing. A month or two, this is going to pass, and then we'll be together." It took 7 months before they got reunited. In my case, it took 7 years for me to get reunited with my sister, my aunt, and my grandmother. The last time I saw my father was at the airport the day I was to make the trip. He was a tall man, over 6 feet tall, and I was predicted to be of similar stature. But I guess, you know, the dinners of rice and onions, it must have stunted my growth. It didn't work. But the last day I was with him, I just turned 9 years old. And he lifted me up on his shoulders, and he pointed at a guy over there. He was drawing a crowd. He was wearing a green uniform thing. He had a scraggly beard. I knew who it was. It was Fidel. He yelled in an angry tone of voice, and he said, you, the ones leaving, all of you are traitors to your country, and if you dare ever return, you will be shot, dead upon arrival. You are nothing but gusanos. A gusano, it's a worm. You're nothing but worms. My father gently brought me down and held me close to his body. Then he pointed at Fidel, and he said, "Son, you see that man over there? That's the reason we're sending you away, for your own safety. When you get to the United States, remember to say thank you to everybody, even if you don't have a clue what they're saying to you. You'll be there. You'll be our little ambassador. You can show them we're good people, we're honest people, we're hardworking people. In our own case, we were allowed to come with $5. We never took any help from the government, any such assistance. We were simply here in search of liberty and freedom. Once in South Florida, the children, about 70% of them, they were boys. And they were placed in camps. There's one camp, Matacumbe. It's still there today. It's about 10 minutes from my house. Every time I go by it, I get teary-eyed. The night before the trip, we were all together in my grandmother's house. The backyards were adjoining. And I remember being there, but the mood was very, very dark. Then the phone rang, and shortly thereafter, the maid came in, and my grandmother said, "I've told you, I'm not to be disturbed unless one of my patients is dying or the hospital's on fire." The maid said, "Doctora, there's a man from the U.S. Embassy, and he says it's urgent." Everyone flushed. They turned white. I mean, it was as if the last drop of blood had been sucked out of him. So she left, and when she came back, she looked also frail and at the same time resolute. She was a strong woman. She was a very strong woman. Imagine back then she divorced her husband, another doctor. Eventually, she became the head of staff of one of the hospitals in Havana. When she took over, they instigated or implemented a new method of anesthesia. And the first 3 patients never came out of the operating room. They died on the operating table. She shut down the operating room and demanded an explanation. 3 weeks later, she had one. The scale used to determine how much anesthesia to give them, the scale was miscalibrated. They overdosed the patients and they killed them. She had the thing fixed and they reopened the operating room, but she taught me, do not trust doctors. Demand proof, demand an explanation, make sure you understand what they're proposing. She took me to the insanity ward one time. She said, "I just want you to come with me and observe." So we went into a space, and there were these 2 guys. And they're just visiting. All of a sudden, one of them starts yelling and screaming, the bugs, get the bugs off of me." And the other one is going like this at him. And I'm looking at my grandmother going, "Oh." And she said, "Just watch." Eventually, we left. And I said, "What's wrong with that man?" She said, "There's really nothing wrong with him. It's just that his reality is different than most of the rest of us. But it's his reality. We have him here to protect him and really to keep him away from the other people that have the same reality as you and I have, because it might scare them to see that. We call it mental illness, but it's just another reality. That's all it is." So she was a very strong woman, but when she came back in the room, she looked like her life had been sucked right out of her. The man from the U.S. Embassy told her he had been contacted by her brother, ambassador to Venezuela, and had been asked to ensure that there would be 2 seats on the last departing flight off the island before they would publicly announce they were breaking diplomatic relations, and therefore there would be no more flights. And she was to tell him if she would accept or reject the 2 seats. She accepted. She said, one seat will be for my grandson. We'll let you know in the morning. The other seat, it will be one of his relatives. So, my fate was sealed. They discussed and tried to get her to be the one to bring me. She said, no, this is a temporary thing. I'm staying behind. I'll hang on to the properties and whatever. One of you go. My mother said, well, if she's not going, I'm not going to leave her behind. My father said, if she's not going, I'm not going to leave her behind. They looked at my unmarried aunt, and she nodded and said, okay, I guess I'll go pack. Holding my hand in a very tight grip, my aunt walked me away from my parents and my grandmother. They left my sister at home with one of the maids, so as not to traumatize her too much. I consider myself a citizen of the U.S., and I am a citizen now. And years after arriving here, and we settled in Sarasota, Florida, the State Department sent me on many cultural missions. They sent me to conduct orchestras all over the Americas. I conducted the National Symphony of Ecuador, the National Radio and Television Orchestra of Uruguay, the Teatro Colón orchestras, where Toscanini got his start. But it was kind of a front. I knew why they were really sending me. I represented the cause. The cause was, it's us against the Russians. And in those days, I was living proof of the welcoming arms of the land of opportunity, the great big good old USA, at least so it was then. After a short time, the classified reports of my work started to be shared with me, and I cried when I read that I was repeatedly referred to as the cultural ambassador to the Americas. So you see, I guess I did live up to my father's request after all. And yet, for years on end, and even sometimes to this day, every time I took a departing flight, every time I said goodbye to someone and I wasn't absolutely sure of when the next time would be I would see them, there was and there is a flood of tears. I could never tell people why it was happening until I finally figured it out. I was reliving the last flight I took from Havana. After being here a few years without my parents, the routine of writing those letters in response to the letters they sent, it got really old. The letters were delayed for weeks, sometimes months because of censorship. Each letter was just another painful reminder of our shared misery. And so to protect myself, I told my aunt one time, I said, I'm just going to declare them dead. I'm going to forget about them. The problem was the letters kept coming, and they needed to be answered. And you said, have I been abandoned? I mean, what do you know as a child? But you had to keep answering these letters. An exercise in futile, repetitive litany of I miss you, I wish you were here, why are you not here? What's the matter? Why can't you come? What did I know back then? But then my father who had secretly been going to homes to treat people so they wouldn't be sent to death camps, he became permanently, terminally ill himself. I was told about it, and since I had started to play the violin here and he had never seen nor heard me, they made arrangements so that I would make a recording, a tape recording. In those days, there were no cell phones. There were nothing digital. So we made the tape. To get the tape to him, arrangements were made to send it to the Swiss Embassy in Canada, who put it in a pouch, send it to the Swiss Embassy in Havana. My mother was notified to pick it up and take it to the hospital. And when it arrived, he played it, and then he requested that they keep playing it over and over, incessantly, as if maybe somehow in some magical way it was going to bring me back so he could give me one last hug. But he died. And all of a sudden, like a kick to my stomach, my soul died too. I was in high school, and I couldn't leave the house for weeks. It took several more years for my mother, my sister, and my grandmother to come out. But by then, since they weren't letting doctors out, the only way they got out is because my grandmother got breast cancer. What were we to do as immigrants to receive somebody that needed an operation and has no health insurance? So I called Anita. She was the cellist in my string quartet. And I said, Anita, I need you to make arrangements to allow me to come and see your father. She said, well, you want to see my father? You're not going to propose or anything, are you? No, Anita, I'm sorry. No, dear. I have to ask him for a favor. She knew what that was going to be. Dr. Schwartzendruber, I wonder, sir, if maybe you would consent or agree to perform a surgery on my grandmother. She's coming soon, we hope, but she's got cancer. And, well, you know, I said, yes. When she gets here, you will have her for 1 week, and then you will turn her over to me, and I will take care of everything. Every year, the week of Thanksgiving, there was a 20-pound turkey that arrived at his house till the year he died. The name Operation Peter Pan was coined by Miami Herald Pulitzer Prize-winning reporter Gene Miller. Ironically, the name of the mission to honor the mischief of a boy who could fly and refused to grow up is in rather ironic contrast to what actually happened to most of those who found themselves alone in America without their parents. Frank Agonis, president of the Florida Bar Association, he arrived on June 13th, 1961, 6 months after I did. He was 11 years old. He says, when I got on that plane in Cuba, I was a boy. When I landed in Miami, I was more of an adult than any child should be. There's so many more things I would love to share with you, some more fun things perhaps, but we're out of time. If you'd like to hear more of those, perhaps you'd invite me to come and share them with you and your audiences. For today, I have to go back to my daytime job and help artists make a living wage. So perhaps you might visit booth 603. I do thank you so much for coming. And visit with my agent, Dr. Prestamo. Thank you.